So tonight we were looking in Ezekiel chapter 4 and 5 in our Bible study, and just the examples that Ezekiel set forth with setting up the clay tablets and preaching to the people around there that God had brought this judgment against them, that because of their rebellion, because they had dishonored God, even though He had blessed them with so much. He expected so much out of them, and yet they turned away from Him and they rebelled. And Ezekiel's even told them, hey, you're going to be preaching a message to a hard-headed group of folks that are not going to listen to you. And we think about today, I set up a little example for us in our Bible study class tonight. I took a plate and set it out and made like a little ice wall at the beginning of the class. And so we kind of went along with the lesson. By the time we finished the lesson up, it was all melted pretty much. There was a few little pieces of ice. But you think about that. That's kind of the spiritual state of our United States here. We were founded on Christian principles. We were founded on principles from Scripture. And just as, whether you believe it or not, we were a godly nation. Our Continental Congress started out in prayer. Most of those guys that were signers were believers. And they've even said that, those laws were made for a religious people. And yet we've kind of slipped away from that. And I don't know if you believe this or not. I certainly do. I believe we're under judgment. And some of the same judgments that Israel faced in their time, where they had foreign powers coming in and messing with things. And you think about China and Russia and all these other things. We're a global community. We're all interconnected. And just the way that things are happening in our world today, they suffered famine. And you look at what we're dealing with right now, where the heat wave out west and the fires throughout the west, and then we're getting floods and all these other sort of things that are happening. We had tornadoes in December in western Kentucky, and now we've got floods in eastern Kentucky, and it kind of makes you wonder what's around the corner. But I do believe as a nation we're under judgment. You read Romans chapter 1, and you see that when people turn their hearts and minds away from God, He gives them over. He gives them over to the depraved mind. He lets all these immoral acts happen in a nation, and so I think we're seeing some of that. Unless we as a people can humble ourselves, turn back to God, we're going to continue to see more of that, folks. We're going to continue to see judgment come upon us as a people. We're not going to be getting godly leaders. We're not going to be reaping the blessings of heaven unless we humble ourselves. And so that's what we're called to do. We've got to humble ourselves. We as the church, if you're a member of a church, first of all, you need to be going there. You need to be supporting that body of believers. You need to be worshiping and praising with them, because that's what we're called to do in Scripture. Don't tell me that you can get that same thing out in the woods or out in the countryside. Yeah, you can worship God there, but you're doing it by yourself. You need to be with the body of believers. There's nowhere in Scripture, I was telling the folks tonight, nowhere in Scripture I read where people are worshiping singly. In heaven, it's all going to be congregational worship. And so you need to be with the body of believers. You need to be worshiping with those folks. You need to be supporting those folks and evangelizing the people around you. And it's important to get that, to learn all that you can from Scripture. So get in a good church, one that preaches the Scripture and preaches the truth and isn't afraid to shy away from that. And then begin to humble yourself. Begin to cry out to God, because that's what it's going to take. No amount of us picking ourselves up by the bootstraps and trying to be as independent and tough as we possibly can is going to work outside of an act of God moving in this nation. And that's exactly what we need. And so I thought I'd just share a little word, what we're seeing in our Bible studies, at church is it's playing out in today's news. And so turn your hearts to the Lord, trust in Him, turn away from your sin, and give it all to Jesus, and let Him do the work in our nation.